I don't think there's any question that Alabama will be ready to play tonight. And UNCLELOU, this offense scoring 51 points a game. It's going to be exciting to watch them against a Tennessee defense that, quite frankly, is overmatched. We're going to watch Brian Maurer play for Tennessee. I think that's going to be fun, too. Somebody's going to be smoking some cigars tonight. We expect it will be on the Alabama side. So listen, the rankings are subjective. We get that. Alabama's number one in the country, but no one, Top and Shay, can argue that the Clemson Tigers have the best wide receiver room in the nation. And we know you're going to be smoking cigars tonight. And the last just went out on me, but the guy I want to talk about is Jerry Jeudy. Everyone's going to talk about Tua, how great this group is in terms of the whole. But when you watch Tua and you watch this wide receiver crew, Jerry Jeudy, not only missing the 42 catches this year, it's what they do with him to take some of the away from the other receivers. They utilize him, they really disguise him, they move him around, and he is really, to me, the most important player on the field for this Alabama football team. It's like McShay walked into a nightclub on a Saturday night. Good job, John Travolta. This place is ready to explode.
Just another day on the job for my Georgia Bulldogs. They pitch a shutout, completely dominated this Kentucky Wildcats team. I never had a doubt. The first half, you come out, you let a team hang around like that a little bit. No sense in running them off right away. Weather was bad. So made the decision, just come out, run the ball around a little bit, play keep away. This run game is just ridiculous. Georgia bounces back without a problem after that slight hiccup last week against the Gamecock Roaches, and absolutely dominates, humiliates, and shuts out just an overmatched Kentucky team. Shout out to Kentucky. They did complete one pass there towards the end of the game. So, just a handful of passes less than my Georgia Bulldogs completed. What was Jack Fromm? 9 of 12 for, 25 yards? Something like that, 30 yards. In all seriousness, the weather was bad. It's a win. I'll be honest with you. You guys know I overreact all the time. I'm going to try not to overreact here in this video. I did that at halftime. I'm sort of torn, honestly, on this game. The weather was horrendous, obviously, for throwing the ball, and that obviously is what Georgia needs to work on and improve on moving forward. I've been saying for 2 years, it's not really a surprise to anybody, I don't think, at this point, that Georgia can line up and run the ball down most teams' throats. The problem is, Georgia football, the program, Kirby Smart, has gotten Georgia to a level where that's just not enough. For me, for the majority of fans, if Georgia goes 10-2 this year and doesn't win the East, that's just an absolute disaster of a season. Now, a lot of teams would be happy to have a season like that. Hell, look at Florida last year. Florida was 9-3 last year, and they bragged all off season about it. So for some lower tier teams like Florida or Kentucky, who I think also went 9-3 last year, that's great. But when you go undefeated in the division 2 years in a row, when you win the SEC and almost win it a second year in a row, when you got a playoff game in the last couple of years, when you've recruited at the level we have, you have to deal with the expectations that you create, and that's where Georgia is right now. So in most years, a 21-0 win over Kentucky would be great for almost all Georgia fans, including me. But the issue is, you watch today's game and it's hard to find any improvement offensively today versus last week, and that's what myself and I think any Georgia fan with any sense wanted to see this week out of this Georgia-Kentucky game. Again, I do think the weather may have hampered that a little bit. The issue with blaming the passing game we saw today solely on the weather, of course, is that we've seen that same piss-poor passing game dozens of times over the last 2.5 years when the weather was great. So we got a week off now, and then, of course, the big game against Florida didn't look great today, but they looked better than Georgia against South Carolina, right? Plus, Florida had to play them on the road in Columbia, whereas we had to play them at home. So, obviously, anybody with any sense probably thinks Florida is a better team right now. And I'm going to be curious to see what the spread is on that Georgia-Florida game when it comes out, because Georgia was like a 13-point favorite in that game in the offseason, the early lines, and would have been a favorite had it not been for the last 2 weeks of football, right? Georgia looked better than Florida the first month of the season, no question about it. Florida was winning games, but they were struggling against Miami, Kentucky, teams like that. But a good win over Auburn, and then a good loss, really, to LSU. They lost, and that's all that really matters in the end, but it's not like they got blown out. It's not like it looked like Florida couldn't even compete. That was a competitive game until late in the fourth quarter. And Georgia, on the other hand, lost to South Carolina at home last week with a pitiful effort by the offense. Defense gave up one touchdown and you lost. And you come out tonight, defense gives up no points, but the offense is absolutely horrendous in the first half. Couldn't get a first down in the first half. We didn't even cross the 50-yard line in this game till almost halfway through the third quarter. So again, a lot of Georgia fans were looking for certain things in this game, like improvement-wise from last week, and you didn't see any of those. So do I think the weather is partially to blame for that? Probably. But it's hard to just solely blame that on the weather because, like I said, we've just seen the anemic passing game for Georgia for so long. But they got a bye week. I'll be honest with you, they've got to come up with something different if they're going to beat Florida. The Georgia team that we've been trotting out on the field this year, at least offensively, I don't think is going to line up and beat Georgia. The announcers even said towards the end of this game a similar point that I've been making. Georgia can line up and push a lot of these teams around, but when you want to win these games against, the upper tier teams, your Alabamas and your LSUs, your Floridas, you got to do more than that. You've got to be able to throw the ball in the SEC at least a little bit. If a defense just has no respect at all for your ability to throw the ball, it just becomes almost impossible to move the ball. Look at Kentucky today. They didn't even really try to throw the ball. They had a wide receiver playing running back, and Georgia was just able to completely shut them down because no threat of a passing game. So, I don't know. I'm glad we won. It's obviously better than a loss. But like I said, I'm a little... I'm sort of on the fence about the game. I wanted, obviously, to see things that I didn't see. I get that the weather was bad. So, I don't know. Florida State just scored, took the lead on Wake Forest. Penn State's up 21-7 on Michigan and Alabama, and Tennessee just started. So, anyway. Tight.